It is day 176 of the second Trump administration, and it appears Donald Trump's patience with Vladimir Putin may have finally run out. We never thought we'd see the day. Well, it may be here. Today, the president announced that he would help NATO get more weapons to Ukraine. He also said that if Russia does not agree to a peace deal within the next 50 days, the country will face severe new tariffs from us. He talked about his relationship and conversations with Putin earlier today. Watch this.
I speak to him a lot about getting this thing done. And I always hang up and say, well, that was a nice phone call. And then missiles are launched into Kiev or some other city. And I said, it's strange. And after that happens 3 or 4 times, you say, the talk doesn't mean anything. He's fooled a lot of people. He fooled Bush. He fooled a lot of people. He fooled Clinton, Bush, Obama, Biden. He didn't fool me.
But here is the question, and we'll be asking it over and over. How will Trump's base respond to this move? We know MAGA largely opposes helping Ukraine in the effort against Russia. They do not want our hard-earned tax dollars being spent overseas. And of course, MAGA is already openly rebelling against the president over his handling of the so-called Epstein files. The funny thing is, right now, the president probably expected to be taking a big old victory lap with his supporters thanks to passing his mega bill. Instead, he is facing enormous backlash from his supporters because of Jeffrey Epstein. Today, the White House put out a statement to support the law enforcement officials facing this backlash, specifically Attorney General Pam Bondi, FBI Director Kash Patel, and Deputy Director Dan Bongino. But judging by the reaction to a Truth Social post over the weekend, that might not do much to help. The president himself wrote a long post backing Pam Bondi, and it became his first Truth Social post ever to get ratioed. If you don't know what that means, it basically means that post got more replies than it did likes and reposts. And remember, this is the social media website that Donald Trump owns, and it is filled with his strongest ride or die supporters. Meanwhile, the president is ramping up his new tariff crusade. He is now threatening 30% tariffs on crucial trading partners. I am talking Mexico and Europe. If they do not reach an agreement by August 1st, Trump says, get ready for bigger tariffs. And guess what? European officials have already said this is absolutely unacceptable. All right, let's move forward and get smarter with the help of our leadoff panel tonight. Carol Leonnig is here, Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative reporter with The Washington Post. Luke Broadwater, Pulitzer Prize-winning White House correspondent for The New York Times. And Angelo Carasun, president of Media Matters. All right, Luke. Normally when I say, what are you hearing from Trump world, that means Trump's base and it means the White House. But right now, in the case of the Epstein files, the two could mean very different things. So tell us about Trump's ardent supporters and the White House. What is their messaging and feeling with regard to Epstein right now?
Yeah, I think this is the first time of Trump's term that he's faced a real serious backlash from his base. And this is very much of his own making. Donald Trump and his allies really led on the base to believe that the Biden administration had covered up a client list and that there were all these pedophiles that would be arrested once he got in there and put his people in charge of the Justice Department. And that wasn't the case. And so, and they continued to lead on the base in interviews, Pam Bondi and others, about the so-called Epstein client list. Then it turns out she actually gets the files. There isn't a client list. And now they have nothing to release, and they have to sort of come clean and say there's nothing here. And the base is lashing out like I have never seen. And you can tell it's really getting to Trump, and it's really worrying him by his reaction and the reaction of people around him. This is the first time he's actually seen them turn on him in any real way.
Carol, you have been covering the Department of Justice and the FBI for a very long time. What are you hearing about these leaders and specifically the behind-the-scenes fighting that is going on between Kash Patel, Dan Bongino, Pam Bondi, the whole lot?
The argument that Deputy Director Dan Bongino and Pam Bondi had on Friday was fairly vitriolic. A lot of people are describing it as, a showdown in which Dan asked Pam, what are you thinking? How could you have said what you said? I'm paraphrasing, obviously, Steph. But this argument is very serious because, and I think Luke says this well, but when you feed your base conspiracy theories like gummy bears, when you hand these out like candy and you stoke people's appetite for this, you better deliver on your conspiracy theory. And Dan Bongino, in his podcast has talked a lot about how, he questioned whether or not Epstein actually really killed himself. Could he have been killed actually in prison? He's questioned a lot of things about the Epstein conspiracy, so to speak. So now he's got to answer to a lot of his viewers who adore him and now are questioning whether or not they should have adored him. And honestly, Steph, this could have been resolved a lot sooner if Pam Bondi had framed things a little bit differently when she said, the client list is sitting on my desk right now for review. She says now that she meant not the client list, but she meant the Epstein files, the actual evidence. But if she had this file sitting around, she could have said, I have the files. I'm not seeing a client list yet, but we'll have more on this soon. She could have kind of tempered this appetite, this raging appetite that the MAGA base has for this incredible conspiracy in which a bunch of pedophiles were being blackmailed by Epstein, overwhelmingly allegedly Democrats. She could have done something to calm this fire down.
Angelo, MAGA has always been very into conspiracy theories, and the president never seemed to have a problem with that. Is what we have here the natural result of cultivating a base that loves crazy things like this?
Yeah, a big part of it. Remember, he organized and built power on what used to be considered the fringes. And conspiracies are fun. They're great stories. That is the part of it. And that is part of the appeal, is that it takes these really complicated, intensive things, sometimes really highly emotional stuff, and it weaves it into something that everybody can understand. And it's a story you want to follow. And Trump and the rest of MAGA media get to tell that story. Where we are now, I'm not sure it was entirely inevitable. I think one of the big factors here is that, in a weird way, Trump is very disconnected from just how bad this is. Because right now, when he looked at, during the election and he was going on those broadcasts and all those other podcasts, he doesn't actually watch those shows or listen to those shows. He has no idea how widespread this backlash really is. So, we're talking about MAGA media, the sort of the core right-wing audiences, but the places where he expanded last cycle, the Joe Rogans, the Tim Dillons, the Sean Ryans, who Governor Newsom just sat down with, those individuals he's losing them faster and faster than even the MAGA media. They're basically out. This has validated every anxiety and concern they had when they got on board with Trump to begin with, which means their audiences go too. So one of the inevitabilities here is obviously you feed the audience this, so you have to have control over all the different parts that are contributing to the narrative. And you have to also pay attention to it so that you can steer it. That has been one of Trump's greatest strengths, politically and communications-wise, is that he's able to shape and drive narratives through all the different parts of the echo chamber. And because he's so monomaniacally focused right now on largely Fox News, it's gone. As far as he's concerned, to a degree, he knows there's some backlash, but he has no real sense of it. If you watch Fox News, you think it worked. He calls Charlie Kirk. Charlie Kirk says today, I'm done talking about it. He sends out the tweet, we're no longer going to talk about this stuff. And then Fox News talks about Joe Biden 85 times between yesterday and 4 p.m. today, and 0 times do they mention Epstein. It only got 2 fleeting mentions tonight. So as far as he's concerned, the trend line's going in the right direction. He doesn't really have a sense of how much this is metastasizing. And the last thing I'll say here, and I think I was so glad during your intro when you tied the two together, when you talked about the Epstein stuff in the context of what is happening right now with Ukraine as well, because he's stepping on another landmine, and he doesn't even realize that with his own base because of how disconnected he actually is. He's adding more fuel to the fire for these fractures to turn into full-blown cracks. But yeah, it was inevitable to agree because these are the people he pulled in.